Have you ever been called a band geek, a theater nerd, cyber dork, studio rat, gamer punk, orchestra dork, book monkey, drama jock, Poindexter, artsy fartsy, or just plain weird? Well then, welcome to Art Nerds. This is the podcast where we sit down with our nerdy friends, embrace our inner geek, and celebrate our art. And welcome back, my friends. This is Art Nerds. This is the podcast where we talk to our nerdy friends about their artwork. Today, on the microphone, I am with Chris and Anne Lukeman. How are you guys?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing
great.
quite well. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking your afternoon with me.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
These guys have what I'm going to call one of the coolest jobs out there, and I'm going to let them introduce it. So, Chris, Anne, what is your art?
Sure. So Anne and I own CU Adventures in Time and Space. We're an escape room company in downtown Urbana.
Yeah, so our art is basically immersive experiences. If you haven't heard of escape rooms, welcome to 5 years ago. We are, so it's a 60-minute game where you and your team play cooperatively to look for clues, use those clues to solve puzzles, and proceed through a narrative and go through rooms to unlock a final objective and do that objective and win the game and save the world.
Yeah.
And it's a ton of fun. I will tell you this right now. I'm going to let you guys know, my brother brought his family down last week, and we played your game called Calling All Villains, and we had a blast. We literally talked about it all night after supper, so thank you guys very much for that. Okay, I have to ask, how did you get into this? Where did this start?
Sure. So escape rooms as an industry started in North America somewhere around 2012, 2013.
They originated from Japan much earlier than that, kind of following the tradition of kind of video puzzle game kind of things in real life. But in the US, they started off on the coasts, primarily in San Francisco, and then kind of moved their way inland until about 2014, 2015, when they hit really
the Midwest.
Yeah, when it became a massive thing. And that's where you see a huge spike of escape rooms all over the country. And now it's a pretty normal thing that most towns of a specific size have.
Yeah, so we have a independent filmmaking background. We met in college making weird horror comedy movies at the University of Illinois. And we went on after college to continue doing indie filmmaking. We showed at several Comic Cons and Dragon Con and stuff like that around the country. But we were getting a little tired of some of the downsides of independent filmmaking. And around when that was happening, we started seeing escape rooms pop up in places that weren't downtown Chicago, downtown New York City. It was proving that this could happen in smaller markets, that people were loving it, that it was a real business or on its way to being a real business that someone could open.
So we, in 2015, opened, basically taking our kind of love of narrative story from filmmaking, production design, again, from filmmaking, and we've been playing a lot of tabletop role-playing games. And basically, we put all those things together to try and figure out how to make an escape room, and we opened in the fall of 2015.
So what prompted the decision to jump into this? I mean, was it just strictly a business decision, or something new to try, or was there some deep-seated artistic reason?
When we do most of our artistic endeavors, we're at least a little bit pragmatic about it. We are solidly from the Midwest, and we try and make sure if we're going to do something, it at least has potential to work. Like potential to be finished and be unique, like that's a way it could work. Potential to find an audience.
Okay.
Obviously, potential to be financially viable is great. We completely bootstrapped. Like we started in a tiny space with just $10,000 in a dream, which you could do in 2015 for escape rooms.
A lot of Goodwill furniture and handmade things that, we were just learning at the time of how to do this. No tech.
Calling in loads of favors from local, scenic designers, from Station Theater and stuff, friends, everything. Friends and family helped us paint and get this place ready. And we were able to open a month later. Anne actually tested the puzzles of our first game, Office Hours, as a tabletop RPG at Gen Con. It would have been a month or two before
2015. Yeah, it was just
a month or
just
two
before we opened.
Where instead of actually exploring the room, she had a Call of Cthulhu group and was like, "This game's going to run a little bit differently than what you're expecting." Well,
yeah, and I basically said, you're just going to be in this room the whole time, and you're going to really thoroughly explore this room. So they would say, oh, I want to check the desk. And I would say, well, which drawer? This is what the desk looks like. So just to try to replicate the experience as much as possible. And of course, it was different in a lot of ways. And I threw in some combat at the end there just for fun, because you can't not have that.
You do. Right. Did it work?
It worked, yeah. Everybody really enjoyed it. It was nice for us because it gave us kind of the confidence that our puzzles were good. Puzzle design was not something we had any background in. And so that was the thing that was the hardest learning curve for us, was how to make a fun puzzle. And this was a good test to see, okay, the puzzles are fun. Right. This is going to work.
Because puzzles are really, and they still are, it's to a lesser degree now, but they really are the kind of gateway or hook that makes this a game for people to play instead of an immersive theater art experience for just people to explore and contemplate. Right. And I think that's what makes it more financially viable and more popular to a general population than just something that is more niche or only art gallery goers, only theater goers.
Right, as opposed to something more akin to a haunted house.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. How did describe your first room, the first puzzle room, the very first?
So the very first game we did was called Office Hours. It is a game that, like Chris said, we play tested as a tabletop RPG. It's gone through a lot of different variations over the years. It's funny because we repuzzled it, and then we called it The Lost Temple. And then we moved locations, and we had a pop-up version that we had used at Gen Con, and so we set it up as a permanent location in our new location too. And then when the pandemic hit, we made it into a digital game that kind of
we had just
saved us during the pandemic.
Finally retired it as a physical game in our location, and we had replaced it, but we had kept all the stuff. We had basically 4 different versions if you count the Call of Cthulhu one, of puzzles that we knew worked to some degree, that we felt good about. We had tons of narrative. We had the ability to go in and take photos of the set. So we were able to convert it into a digital game that's still very popular called The Lost Temple.
And it's still running, the digital version.
It's still running. You can buy it on our website. It'll email you a code, and you can log in and play it right now.
Yeah. It won a few awards in 2020. We really hustled after the shutdown and everyone was at home to figure out something that our staff and we could work on from home. We had government assistance for payroll, but we didn't have the capacity to have anyone in the building. So how do you do that in an escape room? And it's you make at-home games.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everybody went digital.
Yes. Yeah. And it really was kind of a silver lining to the pandemic, because we now had a game that anyone could play anywhere in the world. So now we have fans all over the world. Yeah. People played our game and said, oh my gosh, this is really good. And so a lot of those people, we've had a lot of national and international travelers who have come to visit us because they played our digital games.
They'll go out of their way, fly into Chicago or Indianapolis. Just this morning, we had people drive over from Indianapolis as part of a Midwest escape room tour. And they just left to go play games in Chicago, and then tomorrow in Milwaukee, and took a day to spend in Champaign-Urbana.
That's fantastic. Okay, full disclosure, my daughter Maggie works for Anne and Luke. Okay, and she is one of their game masters, but she worked on the digital version as well.
Yeah, one of the great things about our staff is that they have so many hidden talents. Mm-hmm. And Maggie, for example, is amazing at sound design and crafting sound effects. And so she did an absolutely tremendous job on The Lost Temple, making it sound immersive and making it sound cool. She was so good. Yeah.
And I don't bring this up to brag on Maggie, even though I'll brag on Maggie.
She deserves it. She's great.
Yeah. I bring it up because I bring it up because I got to play test with her this digital game. And again, it was me, her, all four of us at home looking for something to do. And we had a ton of fun. It was a great, we probably spent a couple of hours trying to figure everything out.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
It's not a short game. It has some crunchiness. It has some depth to it, which I think
which I appreciate as a person who enjoys this kind of I enjoy Dungeons and Dragons. I enjoy escape rooms. I like a good puzzle mystery.
It was an interesting shift for us because we're used to the 60-minute time limit. And so to give people an experience that they could play at home and take as long as they wanted, it was a little bit different. So there's no game master, of course. Mm-hmm. Hints are self-selecting, and you can take as long as you want. So I think players really got to experience it however they wanted to. And if that meant taking hints to finish it quickly, great. If that meant not taking hints and stopping for a little while to think over things, that's great too.
Spending all day on it, yeah.
Yeah, it was such an interesting switch because when a team is in our physical escape rooms and gets stuck, misinterprets something, is just missing something that's very obvious, our game masters, like Maggie, are trained to kind of nudge people in the right direction, to do things that encourages folks to find the answer for themselves, even if it's not something they would think of. Right. But for an at-home game, if somebody's real stuck, you have to make sure you're engaging enough and interesting enough that they aren't too proud to ask for a hint, do ask for a hint, and don't just get frustrated and never touch the thing again.
Right. Yeah. So, have you ever had reports of people just never doing this again? Not that I want to bring up bad news.
So I think some people, so the local community, incredibly supportive. I think a lot of people went into this thinking it might be a half-hour, 45-minute game. It's a game that I can play with my 9-year-old or something. And we didn't quite design that kind of experience where it's a parent and child playing solo just to, figure everything out on the own. It's not a kid's game. None of our games are strictly designed puzzle-wise to be for kids. They are designed so kids will have fun, but adults, college students,
they're
smart
challenging.
high schoolers,
really all of our
them.
games are designed for adults, but kids can play too. That's been kind of from the very beginning our target. These
guys have how many different puzzle rooms, game rooms working at the moment?
We currently have 4 that are open. We've designed and opened about 11 or 12 full-length experiences. We moved locations in 2017, 2018, and that means we shut down 5 of our games and rebuilt completely new ones mostly.
Oh, so the ones in the new location are absolutely brand new.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a task.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it was also an exciting opportunity. Instead of reinstalling games we have open, we're able to get our diehard customers back because we have people who play a game, absolutely love it, come play everything we have open, and then we won't see them again for like a year.
Until we open a new room.
Yeah, until we open something new. And they want to support us, but like they're not going to replay. The games they're not very rewarding to replay unless it's something like you played it with a work group, realized your family would love it, and bring your family back to play it. But it's not something you play once and then do again like a haunted house would be.
Like I said, my brother brought his family down and we played one of the rooms last weekend, matter of fact. And then we had a ton of fun. But I could see, and there was 9 of us in that escape room. And it was a little crowded, but there was enough for all of us to do. Enough for all of us to figure out something and contribute to the big overall picture. And it was a ton of fun. But quite frankly, I don't think I could, I could see me bringing back a different group to play it because I did not get to every puzzle. I did not get to every, we divided and conquered. So does that seem to be a norm?
Yeah, well, so you played Calling All Villains, which is our largest game. It is built for large groups to have that kind of thing happen. So that if you have 8 to 10 players, everyone does have something to do, which is actually pretty rare in escape room games. The other games, that typically play 4 or 6 players really well, you'll mostly see or be a part of everything. But calling all villains, I would say, is kind of an outlier for that. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. We do a little bit more to kind of vary up the difficulty based on team size, based on experience. In that one, it gave us a unique opportunity. It's strictly speaking the game that large children's birthday parties play, and there's such a different audience between adults and a gaggle of 11-year-olds and one stressed out parent. Like it's just such a different experience that we put in some kind of stress relief points to add or take away from the challenge based on how groups are doing.
You kind of touched on it already a little bit, but who do you see is your audience? I mean, is it just local? Is it international? Is it national? Is there an age range?
Yeah, so for our physical games, it's really interesting because our audience, this kind of art form, this business has been able to capture a huge target market. We knew we would be popular with like the nerdy college kids. Like we knew that,
and young adults,
Absolutely.
Like that was always going to be a group that comes to see us. But what the surprise was, and we knew it's what should happen, but it was really rewarding to see it pay off, is that we will see pretty much everyone.
In a typical Friday, we might see a corporate group in the morning where everyone's wearing business suits, doing corporate team building. Then we might see a group of kids, junior high kids coming after school.
Or a field trip.
We might see high schoolers coming in the evening, or college kids. We might see a bachelorette party or a bachelor party. One time we had a bachelorette party back to back with a group from a nursing home.
Playing the exact same game. Mm-hmm. They did the exact same experience, the old version of the cabin, the previous version, and they had a blast. There was different amounts of cursing and different amounts of inebriation, but everybody really had a good time.
I think that's interesting that your games are used differently for different purposes, not just sheer entertainment.
The really interesting thing to us is that we see a lot of groups of people who maybe wouldn't go to an art show or a theater show. We see people who would not be particularly drawn to this is art, but they come because this is a thing that people do, and we art at them. They get arted at inadvertently, which I think is really cool.
I do. Yeah, I agree with you. When I was here last weekend with my brother, they brought a friend of their son, of my nephew, and he had worked in some of the Chicago-based escape rooms. And he came down here and he did this with us, and he said, this is hands down my new favorite room. So that's a big compliment to you guys. And it is true. It is artful. It is beautiful. You do get immersed in this, in your rooms. They're fantastic. So how much do you get to interact with your audience outside of running the rooms? Do you get to?
There's a little bit of kind of chit chat during onboarding. So like when a team comes in, we talk to them, and that is ours and our game master's best opportunity to get a feel for what kind of experience this team's looking for. Like whether they're going to like hints, whether they've done this before, whether this is their very first thing and they have no idea what's going to happen, whether they think we're going to slap handcuffs on them and like lock them in, throw away the key. Like there's an amount of talk at the beginning, and then afterwards we try and do a not necessarily a debrief, but a little bit of offboarding that kind of answers people's questions, gets them hyped up to play the next one.
Yeah.
We're also very active in the community. We do pop-ups in the past, and even beyond our digital games. We chat with lots of people.
Yeah, there's a pretty strong escape room enthusiast community of people who travel the country to play escape rooms, or wherever they're going to someplace, they will visit escape rooms there. So we have, made some inroads in that community of people who have played over 1,000 rooms and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's talking with other artists, especially other performance artists. They always talk of this moment where there's this little sparkly moment where the artist and the audience come together in this magical, bright, brilliant moment. Do you get those kind of moments? Do you get close, or is this not that kind of art form?
I think we get close. We're just not there for it. Like, that's the difference between escape rooms, or at least traditional escape rooms, and theater, is that the set is the star. The set does all of the storytelling. The set and like the pre-generated video moments and the sound effects and the lighting, like that has to do the work of that connection.
Right.
And there may still be the game master playing a character either in person or over voice, but the majority of the time and focus is really on the set. And we have had players get so excited and in the game that they forget it's a game and they accidentally break our stuff, which is not great, but I can't fault them because that means we're hitting that moment.
That I was going to say, that's because when we were playing the other night, and I'm so glad I played this before I came and talked to you guys, there is that moment. You succeed and you do the entire puzzle and you save the world. And it's this glorious little yay kind of moment. I'm going to say, do you game master these? Do you get to share these? Or is it just all second information for you guys?
When we started, we game mastered everything ourselves. Now we have, luckily, I think, grown enough that we do more of the design and building and managing and some of the customer service. And we have really, really talented game masters who do the game mastering, typically, unless something goes horribly wrong and a bunch of people are sick.
Yeah, I mean, on a given Saturday, I'll usually try and get a vibe from 80% of the teams that have walked through the door, and that might just be, kind of hovering and watching our cameras while they play. I like to get a general pulse or temperature of how a game is feeling to the average group, which is hard to track because you'll have good groups, bad groups, groups that come in being snippy and arguing with each other, groups that absolutely rock it, and you'll have a kid come out asking questions about the lore of the game and stuff like that.
That's got to be fun, though.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the things that we do, we're very intentional with our design of the games to create those moments where everyone feels like a hero. So the way the ending, the climax of all of our games is, you typically do have that moment. We try to amp up the kind of the time. What's the word I'm looking for here?
The climax,
the adrenaline.
The adrenaline, yeah. So we try to make it so that you really feel like you need to do this right now, otherwise the world's going to end. Yeah. And we try to kind of create that moment in every game so that you have that rush of adrenaline at the end.
Even if your team has 15 minutes left, it still feels like the stakes are high based on how we've designed the game.
Yeah.
And that's just fantastic.
Yeah. Do you adjust the games as you get more feedback? Do you tweak and?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of quality of life things that we just don't know until 100 teams have played it. Until
do you have 50... an example of, just out of sheer curiosity?
So even just recently, we opened the Wizard's Curse, our fantasy escape room, our wizarding escape room, in 2018. And even just a few weeks ago, we went in and tried to talk about why a puzzle wasn't working for all teams. And it's a mechanical puzzle box that's very simple mechanically. Like, there's no surprise trick to it, but you have to line up reels according to unlock it, according to some runes on top, to complete a message that's in semi-Elvish. Doesn't really mean anything. And then you just have to open it. So teams have trouble with this box. And for the longest time, we thought it was a mechanical problem. Like, people weren't trying to lift it. Like, it's not on pneumatics. It doesn't automatically open on its own or anything like that. And And so we kind of sanded down the edges to make sure that it was more forgiving if people were wrong. And we've still been having problems with it for the longest time. And so we set out an afternoon to fix this box. And it started with talking to all the game masters, being like, why do you think this isn't working? And everybody had different theories, but nobody like completely hit it. And then I sat down with one of our game masters, Jason, and we talked about what could potentially be. And he was like, I think it's the third reel. I think this one's the problem. And we're like, okay, why is it the problem? And we found that it was kind of lining up in a way that if you were sitting to the box's left, it would look like it was perfectly correct when it was the opposite. So we went in and we did an art change on it and added an extra little flourish to the Elvish script. So if you put it in that specific position, it was clearly wrong. And since then, it's been working great.
Really? Just a little bitty flourish on the artwork made all the difference.
It's really just a matter of reading what the quote unquote average person will do with every single prop, every single word, every single letter, every single viewing angle of lighting in the entire game, and making sure it's generally pushing people in the direction that we want them to experience the story or the puzzles or the narrative.
And it's one of those things too that even after we open a room, the first people to come play it are the people who are fans, who already know, they're already familiar with playing escape rooms. They know what they're looking for, and they know our style, so they kind of have an idea of how the room's going to play. So even after the first 100 or 200 games, there still might be things that we change, because then general population comes in, people who maybe this is their first time.
Sure.
They're going to interact with everything differently, and we always want to make sure that we are designing the games so that both audiences can have fun.
And the last factor is entropy. Everything dissolves over time, and we see that all the time.
Locks aren't made to be opened and closed 7 to 8 times a day.
Every week can wake out.
It's just not, a door hinge opens and closes so many times, and then it breaks.
Right.
Yeah. And seeing that across hundreds of very specific instances means that the game's going to naturally change. We have to think about things like where. So if, for example, you had a button panel, it comes up as a joke in movies and TV or whatever. You have a button panel and there's a ton of wear on the 2, the 3, and the 4. You have a pretty good idea what numbers are important for the secret code.
Right.
And that kind of spills out to everything, to not just buttons, but hinges. If there's an important number on the wall, a lot of people are going to touch it. It doesn't react to touch. Like if there's a hidden thing on the wall, a lot of people are going to point at it, touch it, get finger oil on it, and it will start to wear down. And then it'll show that it's important, and then it will become unreadable because so many people have gotten it.
Yeah, so constant maintenance is important too.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. That was made very clear when I walked in and saw the wall of different kind of padlocks. And there's 45, 50 different types out there. It's hysterical.
Yeah,
and you don't realize how much it goes through.
Yeah, we've got to have lots of backups for all our locks. So
we don't even have that many locks in each game, but we have to have a pretty deep bench to make sure that if something weird happens, or if a kid just puts it someplace weird. We had a lock go missing for a whole week and a half. So probably 150 people went through the game never finding that a kid had just stuck it in a weird place. We were positive the kid pocketed it. It happens. But he was cleared of all charges.
It's interesting to hear you talk about what goes into an escape room. And you had mentioned that you both have a film background and an arts background. Is that how you approach a new room or existing room? Is it because you use the term storytelling over and over and over. It's not just a pile of puzzles, but is that, am I correct in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, every game that we start to work on starts with a 3-act structure that we have used in film. And we build that structure around what changes when you get to a new space. Most of our rooms have 3 spaces or 2 spaces and something that recontextualizes the whole space. And so we try to line up the story with those dramatic changes in what the space is like. So we have, your first 10 minutes of the game, you're in this kind of new space. You're just figuring out what it is. Usually you solve one big puzzle. All of a sudden something is complicated and now you have rising action.
So exposition to rising action, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. So where did the storylines come from? Dare I ask?
So we have been lucky enough in CU. It's not a huge market. There's only been a few escape rooms that have come and gone. And there's not a ton around in the surrounding communities. So we've been able to and delight in using tropes. Like if we were in a large city, there's probably 10 haunted cabin games in Chicagoland. Like at least.
There's like 4 in Indianapolis, and that's a much smaller market.
Yeah. And doing something like that in one of those cities wouldn't be very interesting. But in Champaign-Urbana, it's a great theme, and it hasn't been done in the area. And we knew we could knock it out of the park, so we have done variations on our own haunted cabin.
Yeah, we basically pick themes that we really like. Typically from movies that we like to watch. We love the Evil Dead trilogy, so haunted cabin feels a lot like Evil Dead. We love high fantasy, so the Wizard's Curse and to a limited degree Game Night lean into high fantasy.
Yeah. And then we'll take a step back. We'll think about things like, what is a neat story that supports this that hasn't really been done, or we can do something funny or something narratively interesting inside that space, so it's not completely bland. Or if it's really a trope that everyone knows, we either knock it out of the park or do a really interesting twist on it.
Yeah. You got to invert it if necessary. We also try to take a very holistic approach to design, because it's not, I think if we just started with, here's a story we want to tell, and didn't consider the factors of the space that we're in and what we can physically do to that space, there would be a tonal mismatch. So we really try to consider the space, what the space looks and feels like, what puzzles we think would work in this space and in this theme, and then how the story fits into that. Because in an ideal world, you want the story and the puzzles and the progression through the physical set to feel like one whole unit.
And on top of that, like, we want to design it so that experience happens amazingly for the quote unquote perfect escape room player, but also happens pretty well for the disinterested dad that's standing in the back with his hands in his pockets. And that balance of, it's not only when you're in the perfect spot, you see the perfect spotlight and the sound hits great,
right?
But when you're deciding to look at a brick that's a very slightly different color than all the other bricks in the corner, that's completely accidental, and you're positive that's important, that it doesn't distract you too much, or it rewards that with something funny that's down there but not puzzle important, or otherwise interesting, or otherwise it doesn't distract you too badly that it throws off everyone else.
It sounds very much like you're creating movies and theater and bringing your audience on stage. Is it? I mean, that's
absolutely.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, because I come from a theater background, so it sounds like instead of just creating your story and your entertainment for someone to sit there, you're really literally you're sitting there and making them create the story and go through it.
Yeah,
it sounds like a real flip flop to me.
Yeah, I at the very beginning, I thought about it like reverse improv, and that you're trying to, instead of yes-anding, where everything can go in a million different directions, you're slowly trying to funnel them into where you want them to be, and you push them where you want to be with everything that's done in the user design in the room. But yeah, it is a little bit like directing, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done several immersive theater productions that have had amazing sets, but use, actors. Like Sleep No More in New York is a famous example, but they have a cast of, at least 20 to 30 in every show. So they're able to use that cast very, very specifically to drive the audience members around in physical spaces and to get that emotional catharsis or that energy. We have actors that do that in some of our games, but we rely a lot more on having a very solid space and very solid sort of the clues guide audience members in a specific way to prime them for the experience. And we only have an hour. And it might be players' first time playing this kind of game. And if you've ever played a board game before, usually the first time you play,
takes forever.
It takes forever and you're bad at it. So like we want to teach people how to play and not ruin their first experience because they shouldn't come back and play the game again. They're not going to get a lot out of it. Right. And we also want to design it so if someone comes in with 200 games under their belt, they don't blow through it in 20 minutes.
How long does it take to create a new room?
It's been all over the place. Our first game,
first game we got up in under 30 days, I think.
Yeah.
But we
30
had a lot
days
of it
plus
planned.
15 days, 20 days puzzle design, plus thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. I mean, we've put up new games in a series of months. We've put up games. I mean, if you count pandemic years as real years, we've spent about 2.5 on our spaceship.
3 and counting.
Yeah. Which should be opening this fall.
Yeah, it can totally vary depending on a lot of things, depending on how much tech is going into the room and how much we need to plan around that, what kind of set pieces we're building, and if they're really complicated. Our spaceship has been really tricky because we can't just go to a Goodwill and buy spaceship parts. I mean, everything has to be designed from scratch. Our cabin went up really fast because we just built a real cabin and used real construction materials, or a real cabin facing and a real floor.
And that's something you can build real fast in real life.
Yeah. So things that exist in the real world are much easier to build than things we have to totally make up.
Sure. Because just speaking from experience, your spaces are exquisite. I mean, and again, coming from a theater background and seeing other designs, they're rich, they're detailed. And is this true that they're detailed to the point where they're almost, what's the word I'm looking for? They're almost distracting?
That's a careful line.
Yeah.
And something we do think about, especially, and that's coming up in our spaceship as well, a very visually dense, interesting, rich set where it feels like people actually use it is a lot. And it's a lot of overload. It's like running into someone's house in their kitchen and having to immediately make a turkey. Like, you don't know where things are in real life. Where in an escape room scenario for that, well, the recipe would be the first thing that you can possibly unlock, and it would be out on the table, no looking around in the things. You would have most of the drawers would be bolted shut or empty, so you're not encouraged to explore the entirety of the space except for the tools you need. And it would still be tricky, but instead of trying to find 10 things in 1,000 things, it would be trying to find 10 things in 40.
Yeah, I think it's about being really deliberate in the design process and making sure that, any kind of pattern matching that you would do, make sure the only patterns that you have are the ones that are important.
Right.
If we've been doing this with the spaceship, there's a lot of hexagons. And so we have to make sure that anything that has a hexagon isn't going to distract from, the one thing that is where you put the hexagons with the hexagons, or, certain plugs go in certain spaces. So we want to make sure there's not a different place where you can put them.
And that starts in the design process of what things are going to look like, but ends up being reinforced by the lighting design, by the sound design.
Sure.
If you have 5 machines in a room and one of them is lit up and beeping, you're going to pay more attention. Most groups will pay more attention to that one. And then 1 in 50 groups will think that one's too easy.
That's the distraction.
And go to the other one.
Well, and part of that is if you make games where the design makes sense, then the groups who play your games will trust you. And they will say, okay, well, this is the one that's lit up. They know what they're doing in terms of design, so this is where we should start. I think that most escape room players who have played enough games know that the designer should not be trying to trick you.
Okay. I was going to ask, have you ever done that, or have you played rooms that are intentionally misleading into that?
Yeah, I mean, there's, they're red herrings are awash in the industry, and typically people don't like that. Or if a room's poorly maintained, you'll see ghost puzzles, which are parts of puzzles that some part has been taken out because it was broken, but they didn't take out the rest of it. So you're like, oh, I found these 4 things. What do they go to? Oh, they don't go to anything.
Nothing.
Yeah. They went to this shelf that all lit up when you put the 4 things on it, but the shelf broke, so we took it out. But we left the things in.
Right. And that's something you see in, places where maybe it's a large chain and the immediate management isn't really interested or involved in the business, or for a while escape rooms were a get rich quick scheme, and so a lot of very bad ones opened in a short amount of time. Mostly I think that's died away with the pandemic, but for a while it was very weird out there.
Interesting. Do you guys have any muses, heroes, inspirations that feed into your art?
Everything I try to do is to recreate the feeling of playing a Monkey Island game. I think that those games, the video game series, the 5th one just came out, those games are perfect to me in terms of puzzle solving and humor and joy and delight. So that is what I always want our games to be. I want them to be funny and joyful.
Yeah, we want to reward players for doing what they suspect is correct, and then when they figure out it is correct, seeing them light up their eyes is perfect. Other, games that have very, very elegant puzzle design, Portal always comes up. It does the same thing where it delivers solid puzzles, but also is sarcastic, also tricks you, but while it's tricking you, it's still rewarding you in a way that's great.
Portal is great at teaching you how to play the game while playing the game too.
Yeah, it's so good at doing things like that. We were really inspired by a immersive attraction in the Wisconsin Dells before we opened, years before we opened.
It's called Wizard Quest, and it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, you go in, it's not Magic Quest. Magic Quest is a different game that's made for children. Wizard Quest is made for children, but
Wizard Quest is made for adults. This was the first time that when we went to Wizard Quest, it was the first time we had ever stumbled upon a game that was like this, that was actually made for adults, but kids could play too. It's honestly where we took a lot of our inspiration for how we target our games. It is in the Wisconsin Dells. It was raining the day that we were there. So we were like, oh, let's go try this stupid wizard thing.
Yeah, at least it'll be funny. Yeah.
And it was 12,000 square feet of extremely well set decorated Fantasy Kingdom dioramas. It was kind of a scavenger hunt. There was a
worksheet where you'd solve puzzles.
You had to scan your barcode in to get glimmers when you had the answers.
To answer questions.
And that was mostly kind of scavenger hunt riddles, which is not amazingly fun, but it was a cool experience. It was a 90-minute game, and we struggled to get to it. We won with less than a minute left.
Yeah, and this was running full speed, pushing families with small children out of
our
the
way. 5-year-old. We're going to win this game.
And at the same time as we were doing that, we would see the grandma, grandpa, and the 6-year-old just like walking around, looking at the wizards, looking at the fantasy stuff, maybe solving 1 or 2 things, but not really stressing about it.
Yeah. It was eye-opening in terms of what an attraction could look like and how something like that, look at mini golf. Mini golf is not built for adults, but what if it was? Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
So they actually recently moved. They're now in a 30,000 square foot space.
Still in the Dells.
Still in the Wisconsin Dells. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
So highly recommend that. On the same trip we did that, we went to House on the Rock, which is also in Wisconsin.
I have been there. That's
which
amazing.
Is, I think the very first time I felt like I understood art was at House on the Rock, because it was experiential art. It was collection of things as art. And it was the way that we walked through the space. It was the first time I've had a cathartic experience while experiencing art.
And it's and either by accident or by intention, it works so well in that it portrays itself as a traditional roadside attraction. It is a traditional roadside attraction on a grand scale.
It's just a collection of stuff.
And then it hits you about 2/3 of the way through both the giant calliope.
From going from the carousel, the large carousel, into the organ room where everything is just arranged like an Escher painting.
Yeah, then
you realize everything
through.
that you just experienced was intentional, meant to deceive and confuse. It's just
it's an absolutely great experience that I don't think gets enough props in the modern sort of immersive landscape
world.
And I think that's interesting because we've been there and we had the argument: is it a museum? And it is.
It's a museum of fake things. I think it asks the question of what is a museum? Does it have to be real to be interesting?
And I think that's what we got out of it, was this huge philosophical discussion. Was part of the experience.
You're about halfway through and you see a display that's the crown jewels, and you're like, wait a second, these are not the crown jewels.
No, this is not right.
It doesn't say that.
And then
anywhere.
you realize, was everything that I just looked at also fake?
Yeah.
Was any of it real? And I think that line that's blurred between what's real and what isn't, and also who cares because it's cool.
Right.
It's one of the famous things there are the fake orchestras that play
the automaton
orchestras, and those are all fake, but it doesn't matter because it seems like they're really playing.
Much fun, yeah.
Some of the instruments work, some of the instruments don't. Some of the instruments
recording
should work, some are just recorded.
Yeah.
The collection of weapons that just like is a mismatch of actual real things that an artist created 50 to 100 years ago, and then complete nonsense things that are just augmenting this collection and feel real. Which is which? Yeah. It's great. And I think the fact that it doesn't have those little plaques of context all around, like the fact that it doesn't say the crown jewels are fake, or if it does in like the most passive way.
I don't think it says that they're fake.
Yeah.
I think it claims that they're real. It's
amazing.
It's a museum with an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
I love it. And those two things back to back, that trip to Wisconsin was what led to us, thinking about creating some kind of immersive in-person work.
Yeah. And it kind of simmered for a year or two after that. And then somewhere around there, I was reading an article about escape rooms. And like, oh, that's cool. I guess that's something cool we should do next time we visit a big city. And then a year or two after that, they started opening up in smaller markets, in the Columbus, Ohio, like in the other places that aren't downtown Chicago, and they are working. And then it was kind of off to the races for us.
I would say right now, in terms of inspirations, Haley and Cameron Cooper own Strange Bird Immersive in Houston, and they run the single best escape room in the United States. And that is hugely inspiring for me. I know I could never make anything as good as what they're doing, but they really, truly are doing immersive entertainment. I mean, it is a show that they are putting on.
That game of any escape room, probably internationally, has the greatest capacity for that moment of audience catharsis where they genuinely are guided to feel real, true, serious emotion that's not, I got scared by someone that's chasing me with a chainsaw.
I cried in this room. It is the only time I have ever cried in an escape room so far.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. There are games in the country, there are games out there that have, better, grander sets, and those can accomplish some of those feelings of being overwhelmed as well. But theirs is the strongest narrative immersive theater production that is an escape room. And they're great. We have had the chance since playing their game to talk with them quite a bit.
And play other games with them. They are great. They are big inspirations for me.
And they run a fantastic blog on immersive theater and are one of the biggest proponents, or one of the most eloquent proponents of why escape rooms are or have potential to be immersive theater when they're kind of looked down upon by the larger companies that have been doing immersive shows.
Yeah, escape rooms sometimes are kind of like the stepchild, the unloved little brother of immersive theater. They don't totally necessarily respect us as art, and I think Haley and Cameron are really pushing the boundary of no, this is art. We're gonna make you feel.
I think we get kind of lumped in with where LARPs used to be positioned in people's minds. And LARPs, I think, have come around a long way in what people think about, how people think about them as art on their own.
Mm-hmm. And that's live action role playing.
Live action role playing, yeah. But I think we were easily dismissed as an industry, especially because a lot of the get rich quick ones out there aren't a great example. And there are fewer get rich quick, low quality, immersive shows, or at least ones that stick around or make money.
Right.
So there's not as much of a comparison. But yeah.
It's hard for me to conceive. Okay, I adore your work here. Okay, it's fantastic. It's immersive, and it's real hard for me to think that you consider there's better things out there, or not. I won't say better, but even more immersive or more impressive. Because what you guys have here is, truly is wonderful art, and you keep using the phrase experiential art. And that's not just an escape room. That's not just a haunted house. Experiential art. That's a step above. And I think you have that here.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think we're doing really good stuff here. I think we're definitely, top tier in the Midwest for sure. I think there's some things that we're doing here that nobody else is doing. And I think holistically, every touch point you would want an escape room to be good at, we try to hit each of those things a little bit. Yeah. I think maybe we're not quite there yet in getting kind of like an empathetic, narrative, cathartic moment for everybody. Mm-hmm. But I think that's something we're working on in our newer games.
We don't have a singular game that is so fantastically amazing that it kind of rises above everything in the Midwest, but we're a very good company that some companies have better sets, but don't have as good player flow or have bad maintenance, or their philosophy hasn't been able to secure good customer service, so their game masters don't know how to run it, or they're trying to push people through as fast as possible to make the absolute most amount of money, so they'll cram 12 people in an 8-person room that don't know each other and have them finish in 45 minutes so they can get the next group in as fast as possible.
I think if you consider set design, puzzle design, player game flow, and customer service, we are doing pretty well on all of those, which makes us kind of well-rounded as a good company.
Yeah. You're not interested in the get rich quick.
Well, I did mention how we did independent film for several years, right?
Granted. But I appreciate that you are focused on the art and the experience for yourselves and for your audience. And I think that's marvelous. And I think that's a rarity.
Well, and I think
like you said, experiential theater, live performing.
It ensures a returning customer base. Honestly, to be completely, capitalist about it, if you have a good experience, you're going to come back and play more. And that's what we want. We want to build. We always started from the true fan theory. This might not be something for everybody, but for the people who are really into this, they're going to come back time and time again, and they are going to tell their friends about how much they enjoyed their time.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a few end of the interview, like quick round James Lipton kind of things. What about your artwork turned you on?
When we finish it?
Yeah. I think if we can catch an idea, like not even set design, not even a puzzle, not even necessarily an interaction, but if we can catch an idea that I have confidence is unique, like that this works for this reason, and I don't think anyone else in the country is doing this particular thing, even if it's a tiny little inconsequential detail, is doing this particular thing exactly like how we're doing it. And that sort of realization has been so satisfying.
Yeah, the novelty aspect is really fun.
Yeah.
Which is great in an industry that's, 10, 15 years old. There's a lot of novelty left to be had.
Yeah. It's still the Wild West in a lot of ways about what these experiences look like.
What about your artwork turns you off?
Not finishing it.
Yeah, so we're kind of in the dark night of the soul for finishing our spaceship, where everything looks pretty good and it feels like there's a close game there, and there's just an insurmountable pile of tiny little fussy details, every single one of which could randomly decide to cost you 12 hours in a day. And just making sure it all tightens up.
The scale at which we do things means that we don't get to put the finishing touches and the nice edges on everything we want. And I think if I could change one thing about what we're doing, that would be it. I just wish we were able to have the time and the brain space and the money to make sure everything has nice, beautiful facings on it.
Right.
Instead of all right, well, we got to leave this bare edge of wood here. Otherwise, it's going to take us 2 weeks more.
Especially as a project manager for other designers, which is what happens a lot of times now, going around and realizing we have to kill people's darlings is... It's brutal.
It sucks.
It stinks, and the best you can do is hope you can reuse ideas and recontextualize good ideas in different ways, and make sure that artistic effort is not wasted.
It's just set aside for something else.
It's set aside, or it's adapted, or it is complemented and put away. Which is that's the biggest downer, having to do stuff like that.
These escape rooms, I include a lot of different types of artwork. Is there any artwork that you have not dabbled in that you would like to?
We have just, I think, dipped our toe in the water pretty recently for building our own animatronics. We've gone off of kits a lot of times. We don't have a ton of things in the rooms that haven't been kind of pre-constructed that does that sort of thing. But doing more with servos, being able to deliver a wider world to players beyond just the game master, and making sure that it's a solid, repeatable experience is really exciting. We have a few animatronic-y things here and there, but it's always been someone else builds it. We see an opportunity, we buy it, we adapt it. But doing more of that is really exciting.
I think another thing that we're kind of dipping our toe in is doing more with our soundscapes. Our newest game is hopefully going to have 8-channel speaker systems, so we can really have things seem a little bit more alive. So we can have things whooshing past, doing different things, having a soundscape that really that amplifies the feeling that you are in a space that is not just a room in Champaign-Urbana.
Right.
I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
Is there any other art form that you would never want to try?
I'm bad at painting, but that's why we hire other people. There's a lot of things that I'm bad at, but we've been able to outsource a lot of it.
But is this something you want to dabble in, or
God, no.
Yeah, I've learned I have a horribly unsteady hand. I can design things, but the implementation of some things, I know what I like, but I cannot do it for the life of me. And that falls into some sculpture-y stuff I wish I could do a little bit better.
I don't think there's anything that I would say I wouldn't want to do. If there was a good reason for it in the game, I would be open to just about anything. We don't use lots of multiple actors in our games right now, and I don't think that's something that we would do. But gosh, if the situation presented itself and there was a reason to, sure. Yeah,
I think there's just about everything has potential, especially if it's an untapped challenge. I guess Yeah, the only things I wouldn't want to dabble in are things that have become tropes of the escape room industry that it's moving past. Like there's a lot of things out there where you would use your screens for hint delivery and things like that.
AR, augmented reality, would have to be a very specific use case for us to want to do that. I think there's still possibilities.
Yeah,
but...
I guess that's true. I do not have VR in me. If we were to, I could consult on a project, but I think our current digital games have kind of pushed as far as I want to go into a purely electronic experience.
Well, to a certain extent, VR is the exact opposite of what we do here.
Yeah.
And if there's a way to include VR in the experience that we're doing, I'm not going to say never, but I think it would take a very, very odd confluence of events to want to include that art form in our games.
Fair enough. Okay, absolute last question. Where can we see your art?
You can visit our website at cuadventures.com. If you click book now in the upper right-hand corner, it'll show you all of the game times that are available, and you can book right through the website. There's also photos of the room if you want to check out what they're looking like. And we do have several play-at-home games, digital, and our Solve Our Shirt line, which we didn't talk very much about.
Which are a ton of fun. We've done those as well.
That's a full-length at-home puzzle game that you play mostly on a T-shirt. Again, Chris loves his novelty aspect of this. So all of that's on the website at cuadventures.com.
Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Do you want to talk about our socials?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest thing to do is just visit our website and go from there. But we're on Twitter at CU Adventures with an underscore in between CU and Adventures. Same on Instagram, and on Facebook, we're the whole deal. Champaign Urbana Adventures in Time and Space.
Guys, thank you so much for taking the afternoon with me and giving me the lowdown and the thought process. I love hearing the backstage stuff. That is where my heart is. So again, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate it. And anybody listening, come out and see these guys. Come play the rooms. They're so much fun. Cannot tell you how much fun.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging around and geeking out with us. If you enjoyed the show, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And more importantly, join the conversation and leave us a message or comment. We'd love to hear about your nerdy art. Thanks again, and join us next week for more Art Nerds.